Virtually the entire United States is impacted by drought at one point or another. At the end of 2022, for example, almost two-thirds of the United States was in a drought condition. That included over 40 states, over 140 million people were impacted by drought. In 2022, about the only part of the United States that was not impacted by drought was the very northeastern portion of the United States. Maine had it safe, but if you lived anywhere else in the United States, you had to worry about drought. Climate change is impacting drought in the United States in several different ways. The first thing is that as a result of climate change, we are seeing more frequent droughts, and those droughts are more severe than they used to be.
So, one effect that drought and climate change has on water rights is that it puts those rights a lot more in focus. When there's plenty of water to go around, typically people don't necessarily feel the need to spend a lot of resources on defining and protecting water rights. But as water supplies become more limited, you see people being more interested in investing in making sure that they know what their rights are, that those rights are protected, and that those inputs into their businesses are there for the future, or at least that they know what to expect.
If I have a client who is in a groundwater dispute, I frequently recommend that they start out by seeing whether or not they can sit down with the other parties and solve the dispute. Because if you sit down with the other parties, you can try to be creative and perhaps actually find a way to make greater use of that water resource than was being used before. You can try to make the pie bigger rather than trying to fight for how much of that pie you actually receive.
When we're counseling parties that are involved in water disputes, there are several things to keep in mind. One is that you need to be very practical when you're thinking about why this is an important issue to you. Is it something that has to do with an input to your business? Is it an overall kind of dispute about how groundwater is going to be managed or how a water supply in a particular river is going to be managed? And that will help dictate what your strategy is when you're approaching next steps.
Over the next several years, I expect to see several trends in water disputes. First of all, I think there are going to be more disputes over groundwater. That's certainly going to be the case in California because California has something called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which is going to require everybody to cut back a bit on their groundwater usage. Another type of dispute, which I expect to grow over the next 3 to 5 years, are interstate water disputes. We've actually seen more interstate water disputes in this century than we had in any sort of comparable period of time in the 20th century. And that's because of droughts, growing populations, increasing water shortages. As those trends continue, I expect to see more and more states fighting over the limited water resources that they share.